My name is Renee, and I'm 32 years old. I always thought family meant everything, which is why I emptied my savings account of $66,000 to save my parents' house from foreclosure. Then I discovered they'd secretly changed their will, leaving everything to my younger sister. I was devastated, but trying to process this betrayal when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Mortgage is due. That's when I finally realized what I had to do. If you're watching this story, let me know where you're from in the comments below. Hit subscribe and join me as I share how I found my voice. I grew up in a modest three-bedroom home in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was filled with memories. The height marks on the kitchen door frame, the treehouse my dad built in the backyard, the scratches on the hardwood floors from countless family game nights. My relationship with my parents was always complicated, especially with my mother, Diana. Mom was the emotional barometer of our household. When she was happy, everyone was happy. When she was upset, dark clouds hung over our home until someone, usually me, found a way to lift her spirits. My father, Robert, was more distant. He worked long hours at his accounting firm, and when he was home, he usually had his nose buried in paperwork or was watching sports on TV. I constantly sought his approval, bringing home straight-A report cards and winning academic competitions, hoping to see that rare smile of pride on his face. Then there was my sister Amanda. 3 years younger than me, Amanda was clearly the favorite. Where I was studious and responsible, Amanda was charming and sociable. She could talk her way out of any trouble while I followed every rule to the letter. When Amanda failed classes, Mom would say, "School isn't for everyone, honey." When I brought home anything less than an A, the disappointment was palpable. "Renee, with your brains, you should be doing better," Mom would say, shaking her head. "You're not applying yourself enough." Despite the uneven treatment, I loved my family fiercely. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, helped enough, eventually I would earn the unconditional love that seemed to flow so easily toward Amanda. When I was 18, I received a scholarship to attend university in Seattle. It wasn't the most prestigious school, but it offered a strong program in finance and was far enough from home that I could start building my own life. Mom cried for days before I left. "I just don't understand why you need to go so far away," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "There are perfectly good schools right here in Portland." Dad just patted my shoulder awkwardly and said, "Make us proud, kiddo." Even though Seattle was only a 3-hour drive from Portland, those 4 years of college gave me my first taste of independence. I thrived academically while working part-time at the university financial aid office to cover expenses not included in my scholarship. I made friends who accepted me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I even started dating a guy named Taylor, though the relationship didn't last beyond sophomore year. Still, I drove home at least once a month to visit my family. Each time, Mom would make comments about how I was too busy for them now, while Dad would ask about my grades and nothing else. Amanda, who was attending community college sporadically while working at a local boutique, was always portrayed as the one holding the family together in my absence. After graduation, I was fortunate to land a job as a junior financial analyst at a respected firm in Seattle. The starting salary wasn't exceptional, but it offered growth potential and good benefits. I found a small but comfortable apartment with a roommate and began building my adult life. I was proud of what I had accomplished on my own merit. Every career milestone became a delicate balancing act. When I received my first promotion after just 18 months, I was ecstatic, but immediately worried about how to tell my parents. As expected, the news was met with mixed reactions. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, before quickly changing the subject to Amanda's new boyfriend. Dad at least asked a few questions about what my new responsibilities would be, but the conversation soon shifted to their neighbor's son, who had just made partner at his law firm. Despite their lukewarm support, I continued my pattern of regular visits home. Sometimes I'd notice small things that gave me pause. A new television that seemed beyond their budget shopping bags from expensive stores in Mom's closet brochures for Caribbean cruises on the coffee table. But whenever I asked about their finances, Dad would bristle. "I've been managing money since before you were born, Renee. I think I know what I'm doing," he'd say, effectively ending the conversation. As for Amanda, she continued to float through life on charm and good looks. She cycled through various jobs and college programs, never sticking with anything long enough to build a career. Yet somehow, she always had money for new clothes, concert tickets, and weekend getaways with friends. When I expressed concern about her lack of direction, Mom would rush to her defense. Not everyone needs to be a corporate robot, Renee. Amanda's creative. She's finding her path. Then, by the time I turned 28, I had been promoted to senior financial analyst and was considering buying my own place. I had diligently saved a down payment and built an emergency fund, lessons I had learned not from my parents, but from my own research and financial planning. I was dating Michael, a software developer I'd met through a mutual friend, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and valued for who I was. Then came the phone call that would change everything. It was a Tuesday evening in October when my phone rang. I was just finishing up a presentation for work the next day when Mom's name flashed on my screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. We had just spoken on Sunday during our weekly call, and I really needed to finish my work, but something told me to answer. Renee, oh Renee. Mom was sobbing so hard, I could barely understand her. Mom, what's wrong? Is everyone okay? My heart raced as I imagined car accidents, medical emergencies, or worse. It's the house, she managed between sobs. We're going to lose the house. Over the next 20 minutes, the story came out in fragments. My parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank had sent a foreclosure notice. They had 30 days to come up with the back payments plus penalties, or they would lose the family home. But how is this possible? I asked, struggling to understand. Dad just retired last year. Doesn't he have his pension? And the mortgage should be mostly paid off by now. You've lived there for 30 years. Mom's explanation was vague and confusing. Something about investments that didn't work out, unexpected expenses, and medical bills that insurance didn't cover. None of it quite added up, but her distress was real and immediate. Does Amanda know about this? I asked. Yes, but you know your sister's situation. She's trying to make it as an artist and barely making rent on that tiny apartment she shares with 2 other girls. She can't help us, Renee. You're our only hope. I asked for specifics, exactly how much they needed, what other assets they could liquidate, whether they had spoken to a financial advisor. Mom didn't have clear answers, just more tears and increasingly desperate pleas for help. Let me talk to Dad, I finally said. Dad came on the line, his voice gruff with what I took to be embarrassment. He confirmed they needed $66,000 to save the house, covering the missed payments penalties and paying ahead to give them some breathing room. When I pressed for details about how they'd gotten into this situation, he became defensive. Look, Renee, everyone makes mistakes. Are you going to help us or not? After hanging up, I called my friend Jasmine, who worked as a financial advisor. We had met in college and remained close, often consulting each other on major financial decisions. This sounds fishy, Renee, she said after I explained the situation. 66,000 is a lot of money, and from what you've told me about your parents' spending habits, this probably won't be the last time they come to you for help. Have you seen any documentation, bank statements? The foreclosure notice, I hadn't. Mom's tears and Dad's pride had created an emotional fog that made it difficult to think clearly. If you really want to help them, offer to go with them to speak to a financial advisor or bankruptcy attorney, Jasmine suggested. But don't just hand over your savings without understanding the full picture. Her advice was sound, but the thought of my parents losing their home, my childhood home, was unbearable. What kind of daughter would I be if I let that happen, when I had the means to prevent it? That night I barely slept. I pulled up my bank accounts and investment portfolio on my laptop, calculating and recalculating. $66,000 represented nearly all of my savings. My emergency fund, my down payment fund, everything I had worked so hard to build over the past decade. If I helped my parents, I would be starting from scratch financially at 32. Michael called during my lunch break the next day. You sound terrible, he said. Everything okay? I told him about my parents' situation and my dilemma. Wow, that's a tough one, he said. But Renee, I know how much family means to you. Whatever you decide, I've got your back. His support meant everything, but the decision was still mine to make. By evening, I had made up my mind. I would help my parents, but not blindly. I would go to Portland that weekend, review their financial situation in detail, and set up a repayment plan. They might be my parents, but this was business. It had to be with so much money at stake. That Friday, I took a personal day from work and drove to Portland. Amanda was conspicuously absent from the family meeting I had called, claiming she had to work at the boutique, but promising to help however she could in the future. Mom had made my favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread, an obvious attempt to soften me up. Dad had gathered some of their financial documents, though many seemed to be mysteriously missing or incomplete. What I did see alarmed me. Credit card statements showed balances in the tens of thousands. Luxury purchases, a 70-inch smart TV designer, handbags, a weekend trip to wine country, dotted the statements from months when they had apparently been unable to pay their mortgage. I don't understand, I said, spreading the statements on the kitchen table. How could you buy these things when you couldn't pay your mortgage? We didn't realize how bad things had gotten. Mom said, her eyes welling with tears again. And I needed something to cheer me up after your father's retirement party was such a disappointment. Dad stared at his hands. I thought the stock market would turn around. I thought I could fix it before it got to this point. Despite my shock and disappointment, I still couldn't bear the thought of them losing their home. But I would not simply hand over my savings without protection. I'll help you, I said finally. But we need to agree on some terms. I drafted a simple contract stating that the $66,000 was a loan, not a gift to be repaid in monthly installments of $1,000 beginning in 6 months. I also included a clause requiring them to consult me before making any purchase over $500 until the loan was repaid. Mom balked at this last condition. We're your parents, Renee, not children. We don't need your permission to spend our own money. It's not about permission, Mom. It's about accountability. I'm emptying my savings to help you. I need to know you're serious about getting your finances under control. After much discussion and a few more tears from Mom, they signed the agreement. The next day, we went to the bank together. I transferred $66,000 to their account, and they immediately paid the bank the amount needed to stop the foreclosure. That evening, we had a family dinner. Just the three of us, since Amanda once again couldn't make it. Mom was effusive in her gratitude, promising that things would be different now. Dad was quieter, but squeezed my hand and thanked me for being such a responsible daughter. The weight of what I had done still pressed on my chest, but seeing their relief made me think I had made the right choice. Before I drove back to Seattle the next day, I went through their bills and set up automatic payments for their mortgage and utilities. I showed them how to use a budgeting app on their phones and made them promise to stick to it. They agreed to everything, seeming sincerely committed to change. When I told Michael about the outcome, he was supportive but concerned. I just hope they appreciate what you've done for them, he said. That's a massive sacrifice, Renee. They do, I assured him and myself. They're going to pay me back, and this time next year, this will all be behind us. 1 month later, I received no payment or communication about the first installment on our agreement. When I called to follow up, Mom had an elaborate story about a pipe bursting in their master bathroom requiring expensive emergency repairs. We'll definitely start next month, she promised, and we'll add a little extra to make up for this month. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. And so began a pattern that would continue for months. The next 6 months passed in a blur of work stress, relationship milestones with Michael, and increasingly uncomfortable conversations with my parents. Despite my regular check-ins, not a single dollar of the $66,000 had been repaid. Each month brought a new crisis or excuse. Dad needed dental work not covered by insurance. The car's transmission needed replacing. Amanda needed help with her rent after losing her latest job. Every time I gently reminded them of our agreement, Mom would become emotional. Dad would grow defensive, and I would end up feeling like the villain for expecting them to honor their commitment. My relationship with Michael had deepened, and we were discussing moving in together when his lease ended in the summer. He was patient with my family drama, but increasingly vocal about his concerns. They're taking advantage of your good nature, Renee, he said one evening after I hung up from another frustrating call with Mom. You need to set firmer boundaries. They're my parents, I replied, the automatic defense springing to my lips. Family helps family. Yes, but it should go both ways. When was the last time they asked about your life, your goals, your happiness? His question lingered uncomfortably in my mind. When had my parents last shown genuine interest in my life beyond what I could do for them? Then came the day that would finally open my eyes to the truth I had been avoiding. I was in Portland for the weekend, having lunch at my favorite local cafe, when I spotted Thomas Wilson, my parents' attorney, at a nearby table. Thomas had handled my grandfather's estate years ago and had been the family's lawyer for as long as I could remember. "Renee, how wonderful to see you," he said, coming over to my table. "Are you in town visiting your parents?" "Yes, just for the weekend. How are you, Thomas?" "Can't complain. Retirement is treating me well, but I'm still handling a few special clients like your parents." He smiled. "I was actually just meeting with them last week to finalize the updates to their will. Always good to have those things in order." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. "Updates to their will." Thomas's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed you knew. Your parents came in last month to make some changes. Nothing to worry about, just standard updates that people make as circumstances change." "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "I must have forgotten they mentioned it." We chatted for a few more minutes before Thomas excused himself to meet his wife. As soon as he left, I texted Mom. "Just ran into Thomas. He mentioned you updated your will recently. When did this happen?" Her response came almost immediately. "Nothing for you to worry about, honey. Just some minor legal stuff." That evening, instead of going to my parents' house as planned, I called Thomas's office and left a message asking if I could meet with him Monday morning before driving back to Seattle. His secretary called back promptly to confirm the appointment. That Monday, sitting in Thomas's wood-paneled office, I learned the truth. My parents had indeed updated their will to leave everything, including the house I had just saved with my life savings, solely to Amanda. I had been removed completely. Thomas was visibly uncomfortable sharing this information. "I assumed you were aware, Renee. Your parents assured me they had discussed this with both their children." "When exactly did they make this change, Thomas?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He checked his files. "The papers were signed on April 17th, just 3 weeks after I had given them $66,000. I thanked Thomas for his time and drove to my parents' house in a daze. Mom seemed surprised to see me, as I had texted the night before saying I needed to head back to Seattle early. "Renee, I thought you'd be halfway to Seattle by now. Do you want some coffee?" "I just came from Thomas's office," I said without preamble. "Why didn't you tell me you changed your will?" The color drained from Mom's face. "Oh, honey, that's not something we needed to bother you with. It's just boring legal paperwork." Boring legal paperwork that removes me completely and leaves everything to Amanda. After I gave you $66,000 to save this house. Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded. "Who told you about the will?" "Thomas thought I already knew. He assumed you would have discussed such a major decision with me." "Now, Renee, don't be dramatic," Mom said, recovering her composure. "It's not like we're planning to die anytime soon. And honestly, Amanda needs the security more than you do. You have a good job savings." "Had savings," I corrected. "I emptied my accounts to save your house, a house you've now ensured I'll have no stake in." "That money was a gift," Dad said gruffly. "Family helps family. You said so yourself." "No, it wasn't a gift. We signed an agreement. An agreement you haven't honored with even a single payment." The conversation devolved from there. Mom cried, Dad grew increasingly defensive, and I found myself apologizing for being upset, a familiar pattern that suddenly seemed so clear and manipulative. When Amanda arrived unexpectedly, Mom had apparently texted her during our argument. She immediately took our parents' side. "Why do you even care about the will?" she demanded. "Are you just waiting for them to die so you can get their stuff?" "That's not the point, Amanda. The point is they took my money under false pretenses. They made me think we were partners in solving this problem, but they never intended to repay me or treat me fairly." I left that day with my hands shaking so badly I had to pull over twice during the drive back to Seattle. Michael found me on our couch that evening, still in my coat, staring blankly at the wall. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed by my state. When I told him everything, his anger on my behalf was both validating and frightening. He wanted me to immediately consult an attorney about suing my parents for the money. The mere thought made me physically ill. "They're still my family, Michael. I can't take my parents to court." Then what are you going to do? Just let them get away with this? It was a question I couldn't answer that night, or for many nights after. In the week that followed, I moved through my days like a ghost. I went to work, came home, ate whatever Michael put in front of me, and slept fitfully. My mind kept replaying years of interactions with my parents, seeing for the first time the patterns of manipulation and emotional blackmail that had shaped our relationship. I finally made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Porter, whom my primary care doctor had recommended when I mentioned having trouble sleeping. In our first session, I unloaded the whole sordid story, feeling both relief and shame at saying these things about my parents aloud. It sounds like you've been the emotional and now financial caretaker in your family for a long time, Dr. Porter observed. That's a heavy role to take on, especially when it's not acknowledged or reciprocated. But they're my parents, I said, the familiar refrain feeling hollow even to my own ears. Yes, they are. And parents are supposed to care for their children, not the other way around. At least not until they're elderly and truly need assistance. From what you've described, your parents are in their 60s, healthy and capable of working. Their financial problems stem from poor choices, not unavoidable circumstances. Over the next 2 sessions, Dr. Porter helped me see how my family had established an unhealthy dynamic where my worth was measured by what I could provide, emotional support achievement they could brag about, and now financial bailouts. The question now, she said in our third session, is whether you're ready to establish new boundaries. I wasn't sure, but I agreed to a family dinner that weekend to try to clear the air. Michael offered to come with me for moral support, but I felt this was something I needed to do alone. If I had him there, my parents would dismiss my concerns as his influence rather than my authentic feelings. The dinner was as uncomfortable as I'd anticipated. We made awkward small talk about the weather and neighborhood gossip while avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, after Mom served dessert, I broached the subject. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our situation, I began carefully. I'm still hurt that you changed your will without telling me, especially right after I helped with the house. Oh, Renee, not this again. Mom sighed. We've already explained that it's nothing personal. Amanda just needs more security than you do. I understand that's how you feel, I said, trying to use the communication techniques Dr. Porter had suggested. But from my perspective, it feels like my contributions to this family aren't valued. I gave you my entire savings with the understanding that you would repay me, but 6 months later I haven't received a single payment. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Times have been tough, Renee. You know that. I do know that. But I've also noticed that you've bought a new patio set, and Mom has several new outfits since I gave you that money. It makes me wonder about your priorities. Are you monitoring our spending now? Mom's voice took on the wounded tone I knew so well. After everything we've done for you. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Amanda walked in as if on cue. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare, she announced, dropping her designer bag on a chair. Oh, dessert. Save some for me. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. Mom's face brightened. Dad stood to greet Amanda with a hug, and I was suddenly invisible. Amanda regaled them with stories about her latest art project and a gallery owner who was totally interested in her work. Not once did anyone mention the tense conversation we'd been having or the financial issues that had supposedly left them unable to repay me. I drove back to Seattle that night with a clarity I hadn't had before. The contrast between how my parents treated Amanda and how they treated me was stark and undeniable. It wasn't just in my head or a result of oversensitivity as they had often suggested. It was real, and it had been happening my entire life. A month after discovering the will change, I was at work when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Mortgage is due again. We're a little short this month. Can you help? Love you. No acknowledgement of the $66,000 they already owed me. No mention of our agreement or the tension from our last meeting. Just another request for money, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I stared at the message for a long time, a strange calm settling over me. This was the moment I'd been working toward in therapy, the test of whether I could establish and maintain a healthy boundary. I called Michael during my lunch break. Mom just asked for more money for their mortgage, I told him. After everything, she just texted me like nothing happened. What are you going to do? He asked, his tone careful. He had been walking a fine line between supporting me and pushing me to stand up for myself. I'm going to say no. Not just no to this request, no to the whole dynamic. I can't keep doing this. I'm proud of you, Renee. That's a huge step. I also called Dr. Porter and scheduled an emergency session for that evening. I needed to make sure my response came from a place of self-respect rather than anger or revenge. In our session, we drafted a response that was firm but not cruel. No lengthy explanations that could be twisted or argued, with no emotional appeals that could be dismissed as overreaction. Just clear, simple boundaries. When I got home that night, I finally replied to Mom's text. I've already contributed $66,000 that hasn't been repaid. I can't help anymore. The fallout was immediate and exactly as Dr. Porter had predicted. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. Mom calling, then Dad, then Mom again. I let the calls go to voicemail, listening to the increasingly frantic and angry messages later. Renee, I can't believe you're being so selfish. We've done everything for you. Your mother is in tears. Is that what you wanted, to make your mother cry? I guess money means more to you than family. I raised you better than this. Then came the text messages. Moms were emotional and manipulative. I can't sleep knowing you're so angry with us. My blood pressure is through the roof. If anything happens to me, I hope you can live with yourself. Dad's were shorter and more direct. Very disappointed in your attitude. We'll discuss when you've calmed down and come to your senses. Amanda's were the worst. Way to break Mom's heart, you selfish witch. Some of us actually care about our parents. Don't bother coming home for Christmas. Nobody wants you here anyway. The barrage continued for days. Extended family members I rarely spoke to began calling, having been given a carefully edited version of events that cast me as the ungrateful daughter abandoning her parents in their time of need. Michael was my rock through it all. He let me cry when I needed to, distracted me with movies and hikes when the guilt became overwhelming, and never once said, "I told you so," even though he had warned me about my parents' behavior from the beginning. Dr. Porter suggested I implement a period of limited contact with my family, not cutting them off completely, which would only escalate the drama, but restricting interactions to brief, controlled communications until the emotional intensity subsided. Set a schedule, she advised. Maybe you'll check your family messages once a day for 15 minutes, or have a short phone call once a week. The key is maintaining consistency and not getting pulled back into their chaos. I decided on a Sunday evening check-in. I would read any messages from the previous week and respond with a brief update on my life, deliberately not engaging with guilt trips or accusations. It was hard at first, almost physically painful to see the messages pile up and not immediately respond, but it gradually became easier. Predictably, my parents escalated their tactics when they realized their usual methods weren't working. Mom had a health scare that turned out to be indigestion. Dad's car broke down, stranding him, though he was less than a mile from home, and Amanda lived 10 minutes away. Each emergency was carefully crafted to make me feel guilty for not rushing to their aid. Each time I responded with brief concern and practical suggestions rather than offers of help. Sorry to hear about your car, Dad. Hope the tow truck arrived quickly. Hope you're feeling better, Mom. Did the doctor recommend any follow-up tests? Meanwhile, Amanda took to social media, posting vague but pointed comments about family loyalty and finding out who your real friends are when times get tough. A few mutual friends reached out to ask if everything was okay, having sensed something was off in her posts. I gave them the simplified version: family disagreement over a loan, working through it. With the emotional bandwidth I was reclaiming from family drama, I threw myself into rebuilding my financial security. I met with Jasmine to create a plan for replenishing my emergency fund and getting back on track with my long-term goals. It would take time, but the path forward was clear. Michael and I decided to postpone moving in together until I felt more financially stable. He was understanding and suggested we revisit the conversation in 6 months. "I'm not going anywhere," he assured me. "We have all the time in the world." And 3 months into my limited contact experiment, my resolve was tested in an unexpected way. The apartment above mine had a plumbing issue that sent water cascading through my bathroom ceiling at 2 a.m. By morning, much of my apartment was water damaged, and I had to temporarily relocate while repairs were made. In the past, this would have been the moment I called my parents for help. Now, with my emergency fund depleted and my relationship with them strained, I had to handle it on my own. My insurance covered a hotel for a week, but the repairs would take longer. Without hesitation, Michael offered his spare room for as long as I needed it. As I sorted through my damp belongings, deciding what could be saved and what had to be discarded, I found myself unexpectedly calm. 6 months ago, this disaster would have sent me into a panic. Now it felt manageable. Unpleasant, certainly, but not catastrophic. That night, curled up on Michael's couch with a cup of tea, I had an epiphany. For years, I had believed I needed my parents' approval and support to navigate life's challenges. But here I was handling a genuine crisis without them, and doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. I was discovering a resilience and self-reliance I hadn't known I possessed. It was a turning point. The guilt that had been my constant companion began to recede, replaced by a growing confidence in my decision to establish boundaries. I wasn't abandoning my family. I was refusing to enable harmful patterns that hurt all of us in the long run. Dr. Porter called it a breakthrough. "This is what healthy autonomy looks like," she said in our next session. "Not cutting ties completely, but making conscious choices about what role your family plays in your life, rather than automatically assuming they must be at the center of everything." The next time Mom texted about needing money, this time for a property tax bill they hadn't expected, I didn't feel the familiar surge of guilt and obligation. Instead, I felt a calm certainty as I replied, "I'm not in a position to help financially. Hope you can work something out with the tax office about a payment plan." For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. Not out of selfishness, but out of a genuine understanding that I couldn't help anyone if I kept depleting my own resources, financial or emotional. 6 months of limited contact brought significant changes to my life. My work performance improved without the constant distraction of family crises. Michael and I grew closer, having weathered a challenging period together. Most importantly, my sessions with Dr. Porter had helped me develop a stronger sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to my role as the family fixer. I had maintained the weekly Sunday check-ins with my parents, which had gradually become less fraught. Mom still occasionally made passive-aggressive comments or slipped in mentions of financial struggles, but the intensity had diminished. Dad had taken on more hours at a local tax preparation service during filing season, which had apparently eased some of their financial pressure. Amanda had moved to Portland's trendy Pearl District with a new boyfriend who apparently had family money. One Tuesday afternoon, I was grabbing coffee at a shop near my office when I heard a familiar voice. "Renee." I turned to find Amanda standing behind me in line, looking as surprised as I felt. "She was in Seattle for a friend's gallery opening," she explained. "Do you have a minute to sit?" she asked, a note of uncertainty in her voice I rarely heard. We found a quiet table in the corner. For a few minutes, we made awkward small talk about the weather and her drive up from Portland. Then she took a deep breath. "Look, I know things have been weird with the family. Mom and Dad won't really talk about what happened with you, but I've picked up enough to figure out it has something to do with money and the house." "It's complicated," I said carefully, unsure how much she knew or how honest I could be without creating more family drama. "They borrowed a lot of money from you, didn't they? And they haven't paid it back." The directness of her question surprised me. "Yes, $66,000 to save the house from foreclosure." Amanda winced. "Jesus, Renee, I had no idea it was that much. Mom just said you'd helped out a little with some bills." "There's more to it," I said, and found myself telling her about the will change and the continued request for money even after I'd emptied my savings. As I spoke, I watched her expression shift from skepticism to shock, and finally to something that looked like genuine remorse. "I swear I didn't know about any of this," she said when I finished. "About the will. Mom told me they were just updating it to include my new name after the divorce, not changing who gets what. And I definitely didn't know you'd given them that much money. Every time I've asked about their finances, they say everything's fine." I wasn't entirely sure I believed her, but her distress seemed genuine. They've always been weird about money, she continued. Remember how they would never tell us how much anything cost growing up, and how Dad would get angry if we asked about his salary or the mortgage? I just assumed all parents were like that until I started talking to friends about it in college. We talked for over an hour, sharing perspectives on our upbringing that I'd never considered. Where I had seen Amanda as the favored child who got away with everything, she had seen me as the golden child whose achievements set an impossible standard. Where I had worked desperately for approval through achievement, she had sought it through emotional caretaking, being the daughter who was always there, always agreeable, never moving away or challenging the family dynamic. They've been borrowing money from me too, she admitted finally. Not as much as you. I don't have that kind of money. But a few hundred here, 1,000 there. I've probably given them 15,000 over the past couple of years. Have they paid you back? I asked, already knowing the answer. No. There's always some reason why they can't right now, but will definitely next month. She gave a bitter laugh. I can't believe I never saw the pattern. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. We weren't suddenly best friends, but there was a new understanding, a recognition of how we'd both been manipulated in different ways to serve our parents' needs, rather than being supported in our own growth. I'm thinking of moving, Amanda said as we walked out of the coffee shop. Maybe to Seattle or Tacoma. Something about Portland just feels stagnant, like I can't really grow there. I think that would be good for you, I said, meaning it. Distance provides perspective. Would it be okay if I called you sometimes to talk about normal sister stuff, not just family drama? I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Amanda called with disturbing news. She had been helping Mom organize some paperwork and had discovered they had taken out a second mortgage on the house after I had paid off their arrears on the first mortgage. The money had apparently funded a 2-week cruise and some home renovations they had vaguely attributed to insurance claims when I asked about them during visits. I confronted them about it, Amanda said. Dad got really angry and Mom cried, but they didn't deny it. They just said they deserve some happiness in their retirement and that I wouldn't understand until I'm their age. This final deception galvanized me to take action. It was time for a direct conversation with clear boundaries and consequences. With Dr. Porter's guidance, I arranged a meeting with my parents at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between Seattle and Portland, where we could talk privately but publicly enough to discourage extreme emotional outbursts. Amanda offered to be there as well, but we decided it would be better for me to speak to them alone first. She would have her own conversation with them later, establishing her own boundaries based on what felt right for her. The meeting was tense but productive in ways I hadn't anticipated. I laid out everything I knew. The $66,000, the will change the second mortgage, the continued request for money, and explained how these actions had affected my trust in them. I will always be your daughter, and I will always love you. I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. But our relationship needs to change. I cannot and will not provide financial support anymore. Not loans, not gifts, not emergency bailouts. That boundary is non-negotiable. Mom started to cry as expected. So you're just abandoning us in our old age? After all we've done for you. I'm not abandoning you. I'm still here, still willing to have a relationship. But it has to be a healthy one based on mutual respect, not one where my value is measured by what I can give you. Dad was quiet for a long time before speaking. We never meant to hurt you, Renee. Things just got out of control. The money problems started small, but then they kept growing. I understand that, and I'm not here to punish you or make you feel bad. I just need you to understand that things have to change. The conversation continued for hours. There were moments of defensiveness, attempts at manipulation, and genuine confusion from my parents about why their behavior was problematic. But there were also moments of real connection and glimmers of understanding. By the end, we had established a new framework for our relationship. I would not discuss money with them at all. No listening to financial woes, no advice, no assistance. We would focus on rebuilding trust through consistent, respectful communication about other aspects of our lives. And I made it clear that any attempts to circumvent these boundaries would result in me stepping back from the relationship temporarily. What about the money you already gave us? Dad asked as we were preparing to leave. I've made peace with the fact that I'll probably never see it again, I said honestly. I've let it go, but that doesn't mean I'm open to giving more. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There was no tearful reconciliation or dramatic promise to change decades of ingrained behavior patterns. But it was a beginning, a first step toward a healthier dynamic. On the drive back to Seattle, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had spoken my truth, set my boundaries, and stayed true to myself despite the emotional pull of family expectations. Whatever happened next, whether my parents respected these new boundaries or not, I knew I had done what was right for me. Michael was waiting at his apartment with takeout and wine when I returned. How did it go? He asked, pulling me into a hug. Better than I expected, worse than I hoped, I said with a small laugh. But I said what I needed to say, and I think they actually heard some of it. I'm so proud of you, Renee. That took incredible courage. As we sat on his couch sharing food and conversation about a future that suddenly felt wide open with possibilities, I realized how much I had gained by letting go. In releasing the obligation to be my parents' financial safety net, I had reclaimed my agency, my self-respect, and my right to prioritize my own well-being. 6 more months have passed since that pivotal meeting with my parents. The journey hasn't been a straight line toward perfect family harmony. There have been setbacks, attempts to test boundaries, and moments of doubt on all sides. But overall, we've found a new equilibrium that feels sustainable and surprisingly more authentic than our previous dynamic. Mom still occasionally makes comments about financial struggles, but she no longer directly asks me for money. Dad has taken on a part-time bookkeeping job that seems to have stabilized their finances somewhat. Most importantly, I've maintained my boundary without guilt or apology. Amanda moved to Tacoma last month and has been thriving in her newfound independence. She's enrolled in a graphic design program at a local community college and has stopped giving our parents money as well. We talk at least once a week, building a sister relationship based on mutual respect, rather than shared family trauma. My own life has blossomed in unexpected ways. Without the constant drain of family drama, I've had energy to pursue interests I had neglected for years. I joined a local hiking group, took a creative writing class, and even started volunteering at a financial literacy program for high school students. Michael and I moved in together 3 months ago, combining our households in a sunny apartment with a small balcony where we grow herbs and tomatoes. We're talking about the future, marriage, possibly children someday, with an openness that feels both exciting and grounded. Financially, I'm still rebuilding, but my emergency fund is growing steadily. I've adjusted my timeline for buying property, recognizing that my worth isn't tied to hitting specific financial milestones by certain ages. My career continues to progress with a promotion to team lead last quarter that came with a significant salary increase. The healing process hasn't been linear. There are still days when I doubt my decisions when the old programming kicks in, and I feel selfish for prioritizing my needs. In those moments, I return to the lessons I learned in therapy with Dr. Porter. Love doesn't require financial sacrifice. Being a good daughter doesn't mean being a bottomless resource. It's possible to care deeply for family while maintaining healthy boundaries. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about mutual support, respect, and care. Michael has become family. My close friends have become family. Even my therapy group, where I continue to attend monthly sessions, has become a kind of family. People who see me clearly and value me for who I am, not what I can provide. As for my parents, we're still finding our way toward a new kind of relationship. It's not always comfortable, and there are awkward silences where financial discussions used to fill the space. But there are also new conversations emerging about books they're reading, documentaries I've watched, memories from my childhood that don't revolve around achievement or disappointment. Last week, Mom called just to tell me about a bird's nest she found in their backyard maple tree. Not to complain, not to subtly hint at needing help, just to share a moment of simple joy. It was a small thing, but it felt like the beginning of something new, a relationship based on genuine connection rather than transaction. I don't know what the future holds for my family. I don't know if my parents will ever fully understand how their behavior affected me, or if they'll make lasting changes to their financial habits. What I do know is that I found a freedom I never thought possible. The freedom to love them without being controlled by them to care, without caretaking to be their daughter, without being their bank. If my story resonates with you, know that you're not alone in facing these difficult family dynamics. It's possible to break free from unhealthy patterns while still honoring the love you feel. It's possible to say no with compassion. It's possible to build a life that's truly yours. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you manage that process? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never measured by what you give, but by who you are.